It's Zach Hall, your friendly neighborhood game master here, doing something new on the channel. Partly because I'm cranking up what content I am doing on the channel as time allows. I am getting into creating more TTRPG, pen and paper, D&D content as my activities in those hobbies increase. So all that's fun. I'm hoping that you enjoy the additional content here on the channel. At the same time, I want to just this isn't a dumping ground of quote unquote intentionally bad content. At the same time, if I find it interesting, my plan is putting it here on the channel in the case that there might be other people who find it interesting. All my stuff falls under that category. This definitely falls into that category, though. I don't expect this hopefully series to have a large following. This is what I am loftily calling this my dev diaries for developing a Stargate pen and paper game using the Modifius 2D20 system, which they released an SRD for several years ago. This mainly was like a switch in my brain got flipped last night while on Threads. Someone reminded me that I have always wanted to play a Stargate pen and paper game, but I've yet to find a system that's done it well. I think I've mentioned here on the channel that years ago I started creating a homebrew for a Stargate game, and even ran a session with it. I'm using the Genesis system, which at the time felt like the up and coming system for like really cinematic games with a ton of variable success ratings, ranges, etc. Like it wasn't just pass fail like I was used to with 5Es, but that was really my exposure to that type of game. So I thought Genesis was going to be the ideal. Don't I don't think anybody but the Star Wars games is using Genesis, really. I feel like the world has kind of moved on. And since then, I've really taken a shine and really kind of fallen in love with Modifius's 2D20 system that is mainly used for their Star Trek Adventures games, but I think it's now used for their Fallout pen and paper game that came out in the past year. I think there's a Conan system that uses it. That Modifius's in-house system, the various IPs they have licenses for, it's getting used in. But they, I think, intelligently created an SRD for it with some like what I would call like generic names for things. Like there's no tie to any IP for it, and created a way for people to be able to create games using the 2D20 system. And I think that Stargate has a lot in common with Star Trek, and I think wouldn't take a lot of work to create a Stargate hack, for lack of a better word, to be able to use the 2D20 system to run home games in the Stargate universe. Now, of course, Stargate is a licensed IP, was owned by MGM, now owned by Amazon. I believe I know for a fact that that Wyvern Gaming got the license from MGM and ran a Kickstarter that was successful, and they shipped out core rulebook for a brand new Stargate role playing game that was built on 5e. Did not like it, even though I backed it. I have the special edition hardback cover. It's useful as like a setting guide and some ideas, but I don't think that 5e serves this genre and the type of stories told in it very well at all. I think that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, really opened my eyes to the fact that like 5e cannot do everything, that you should just stop, let 5e be good at what it does, and embrace the fact that there are other systems out there, other games that you should play, enjoy, and learn about in order to tell different kinds of stories. But like I said, I think Star Trek and Stargate have a lot in common. Obviously, they're both, for the most part, episodic TV series that have major arcs told in long form, but they are often in a world of the week type storytelling, which I think is really beneficial, leans a lot into pen and paper but also we get these long stretches and even some like specific series, like Deep Space Nine, that end up creating a very like a much tighter a storyline that is being told across multiple episodes, not just tied to like two-parters like we got mainly in Next Gen, that kind of stuff. So I think they're similar enough. There's obviously some theme differences where while they both have a command structure, and Starfleet mimics a military structure in a lot of way, in almost every way. The focus of Starfleet stories being told on TV and in movies has been about exploration, science, diplomacy, exploration, as opposed to like a military endeavor. Most of the main characters are always against when external forces make things become more military. I guess maybe Deep Space Nine to a lesser extent, where we see some more of that the military-based storylines in Deep Space Nine. In Stargate, it is explicitly a military science fiction show. Now, the tension between the military and non-military aspects of Stargate Command and its allies are a huge tension and friction point in the fiction of the game, but it is very much based in this military structure. But I think they're similar enough to where we can kind of use the Modifius 2D20 system, its generalities, to help us create a game that makes sense. And then in areas where we think is useful, look at Star Trek Adventures and how they created or maybe renamed, shifted things around to be able to tell the type of stories specific to Star Trek, and see if we might make similar choices to run our Stargate games. I've got some notes here. We can talk kind of about like what makes Modifius 2D20 2D20. How does it really work at its most basic level? I will not cover every in and out. There's I'm sure some other great YouTube videos that explain 2D20 to a more fuller extent, but gives you enough that if you never interacted with the system before, we can talk about some of the basics without necessarily getting lost. Got a mission statement, and then we'll kind of dive into the very beginnings of character creation, which I think is the starting place that makes the most sense. If you don't really know what your characters do, how they do it, what they're about, I think it's more difficult to build a pen and paper system without that. So starting with, okay, what do we care about when we are creating our characters, and then we can expand from there. But to explain the 2D20 system, we have attributes and skills. These are the two main sections on your character sheet that you are probably looking at the most when you are looking to roll die. And this is a roll low system. So the formula most often used is that the player and the GM have a conversation and pick a attribute and skill combination that makes the most sense for the task that you're trying to complete. You always pick one attribute and you always pick one skill. The attribute will have a number, and the skill will have a number associated with it. You add those two numbers together, that number becomes your target number, or your TN. The task that you're trying to complete then has a difficulty that is set by the GM. This is not where the attribute and skill combination is a conversation. I believe it should be a conversation between the GM and the player, because as you'll see later, picking an attribute and skill largely can be dependent on the character's disposition, their own internal process for decision making, and how they would go about something that might not be completely obvious to the GM when creating the task. So having that conversation, essentially a meta conversation between the player and the GM, is important, and I think a pillar of the game, and something that I think is exciting and something I love about the system, as opposed to the difficulty that is set by the GM. That is determined by things that only the GM knows. Like, what is the GM attempting to achieve by creating this task? And some hidden knowledge about like the lock that you're trying to pick, the computer system you're trying to hack, defenses of the base that you are trying to attack, that kind of thing. The difficulty ranges from 0 to 5, with 5 being the most difficult, a difficulty 0 task essentially being, it's kind of this is kind of a meta generator that we can discuss in future videos, but zero difficulty tasks do exist. So in the basic check process goes, you figure out your target number, the GM announces what the difficulty is ahead of time. The player then rolls 2d20 or more, depending on applicable things from their character sheet. And then the result on each die, you're aiming to be less than the target number. And if the result on each die is less than the target number, you get a success. So you're always rolling at least 2d20. So the hope is that on a difficulty 1 task, you roll under the target number at least once on one of the 2 die. And if you do, you roll 1 success on a 1 difficulty task, you succeed at that task. So if your successes equal or are greater than the difficulty, you succeed at the task that you are attempting to succeed at. If you exceed the successes necessary, so if it was a difficulty 1 task and you ended up rolling 2 successes, that excess successes becomes a player resource called momentum. Momentum is used heavily in the system. It's a way for players to buy additional dice on important rolls. It's a way for the players to create advantages for themselves in the narrative. And most importantly, in systems like Star Trek and Stargate, it is a mechanical way for the players to be able to ask information of the GM in a meta way. Hardest part of creating games, I think, with really competent, specialized characters, like in Star Trek and Stargate, is the gap between what the player knows and what the character knows is ginormous, way bigger than what I think most 5e type situations. I'm just going to compare to 5e because it's the most popular and another system that I am intimately familiar with. So where, of course, you have the basic things like what does my character see, which is similar in all types of pen and paper games. Zach, I'm not trained in the theoretical quantum mechanics, but my character very much could be. I would have no idea what to even say or go about it, but my character would. You have to have this meta conversation between the player and the GM for the GM to be able to kind of like explain or give some in-universe information that the character would absolutely know, but the player would have no idea even where to begin with. Now, of course, like I don't know how to throw a sword or how to cast a spell in more like fantasy type games, but all that stuff is abstracted away anyway. It's not really based in any kind of reality or in universe in any kind of like granite, like solid way that would require the GM to convey that type of information to you, the player. So that's a big difference. So momentum and information gathering being mechanically in the system, I think, is a really important part of why I think this system works for Stargate and becomes a big part of the game. If you roll a natural 1 on the die, that is a critical success, and it equals 2 successes. What did I buy? And more. I guess I think I must have written this in the wrong place, but essentially a critical success equals 2 successes. So gives you the ability to, if you're rolling 2d20, you need 2 successes. You could roll a crit success on one of the die and just a normal success on the other. You got 3 successes. So not only are you successful at that task, you can use momentum. That excess success helps you generate momentum, gives you an opportunity to create an additional advantage that wasn't part of the additional task, or to ask an additional question, gathering information from the GM that you normally would have with just the standard success. The flip side, rolling a natural 20 is a critical failure. That equals complications. Complications, by and large, generate threat, which is the opposite of momentum. It is a GM resource that the GM can spend to introduce narrative complications to the story. It's a really great resource, and I think it adds some meta tension at the table where the players always know how much threat the GM has. So going into a situation that might sound normal, but knowing that the GM has a 7 threat in their threat pool, like that can create a scary situation. And I find that to be just a great mechanic as well. There's this push and pull between the player's pool of momentum, which is a shared pool between the entire party, and the threat pool owned by the GM. It's just a very cool mechanic that not only creates this social mechanic at the table between all of the players, including the GM, but also this in-game mechanic to be able to create really complex and complicated situations that aren't just the GM or the players willy-nilly. There's a resource that must be paid and accounted for in order to do, which I think is great. So before we actually start building in, like creating and like creating the mechanics for creating characters, I thought it was important to kind of create and craft a guide star, a North Point guidepost mission statement for what the game is supposed to be. Helps me know that when I come to a crossroads and what to choose, what options available to me. Should I pick one or should I pick two? Should I pick A? Should I pick B? If I've already kind of pre-decided something, it might help me make decisions farther on down the road. And I think while I don't really know if me developing this is intended to be shared with anybody else, as players or consumers of a product, I think having a mission statement that's publicly available helps people know ahead of time what kind of game it is and what it is not, and can help them determine if they want to spend the time or money, energy into it. While I probably knew this intuitively, this really clicked for me while learning and going through the crowdfunding process for Matt Colville and MCDM's upcoming RPG system that they're creating in-house. They have a really clear mission statement that they talk about all the time with some really specific keywords that help them as they're going through their game development process. I don't know what I'm doing, so looking to people that definitely know what they are doing and mimicking them to a certain extent seems like a good idea. So here's what I kind of came up with on the fly. This might change a little bit since this is kind of my really first time trying to develop something not entirely whole cloth, but something kind of publicly that isn't just like a homebrewed magic item for my 5e game, with something much, much smaller. So what I come up with, the characters in a Stargate game are highly competent explorers voluntarily facing the unknown. I think that should be 100% true for any player character created in a Stargate game or this Stargate game. And I think it creates kind of expectations for the type of character someone should be creating. While there are certainly like bumbling goofball characters, even recurring characters in the Stargate series, I don't think that type of character should be played in a long-running campaign of that game. If you look at the SG-1 team or the Stargate Atlantis team and their multiple faces, those are highly competent people who are out exploring the universe. All of them volunteered for the role, and they know that they are going into situations where there's no way for them to know exactly what's going to happen. They have to have a broad area of skills, be willing to be flexible, know that their plans might be thrown out the window, sometimes very intentionally trust the decision-making process of other people in order to get them out of hairy, bad situations. Some alternative keywords that I think are applicable are potentially heroic and cinematic. Cinematic, certainly, we are taking a look at and trying to develop a game that is specifically based on a movie and TV show franchise, very long running. These are not gritty, realistic games or stories being told. These are, our characters have plot armor. Our main characters are intended to last a long time. They would not die out of the blue all of a sudden to a faceless, unnamed combatant's accidental grenade throw, that kind of thing. In heroic, my intention is to build a game telling a story about inherently, while flawed, good characters who are serving a purpose and a mission. They might have personal goals that might be selfish and less contributive to the overall good for everyone, but by and large, the intention is to create good heroic characters who are willing to put themselves on the line in order to serve people who cannot defend themselves, serve themselves in specific situations. but I'm not putting those specifically in the mission statement because I think these are more flexible. I think there are definitely stories that can be told that are super gritty and realistic in the Stargate universe, even if I'm not intentionally building one that way. And I think that there are definitely avenues for less heroic, more mercenary, more neutral type of stories being told in the Stargate universe, even if that isn't the default. Things that this game is tactical. Don't anticipate this game being played on a grid with like really specific movement and like very strict actions. I imagine combat here we played out pretty similarly to how it does in Star Trek Adventures, which is part of the reason why I think the 2D twin system is going to really lend itself to Stargate style stories, and why I don't think 5e serves it well. This was kind of helpful for me as I was kind of thinking about the type of people in the original SG1 team and what I was kind of like, what kind of areas did I need to cover. And then here's my list of attributes and skills that I think I'm gonna start building off of these, assuming I've got these, like these are the final names. But obviously something could change. I don't fully, like, I'm not 100% confident and love these, but I wanted to go ahead and kind of like get something on paper that gets me at least 80% of the way there, that if I need to come back and change something, I don't think it would ruin anything. But I think I need to get farther into the process before I really know if it's absolutely going to work. So just get something on the page, move forward, knowing that I'll do my best to make these work, but if they don't, then we'll adjust. Attributes are a combination of both the generic 2D20 attribute list and the list from Star Trek Adventures. There is some crossover here. The generic SRD has attributes agility, brawn, coordination, insight, reason, and will. Agility is not on this list. Will has been replaced with presence. Daring is not on the SRD list. I've added it from Star Trek Adventures because I really like how daring is described in the Star Trek Adventure game, as opposed to like agility and coordination. I feel like there's a lot of there can be a lot of overlap there, and I don't think the characters in Star Trek Adventures or in Stargate need that level of separation between agility and coordination. So we've ended up with a list of 6 attributes that can largely be drawn into 3 separate categories with two attributes each. We've got brawn and coordination, which are our physical attributes. Daring and insight being, or really it should be, well, I don't know. Now that I'm saying it out loud, daring is supposed to be like, how does your character behave in a situation where there is no plan? What are your gut instincts? Can you behave or act in a way that is not detrimental to your goal or to the rest of your party when shit hits the fan and whatever plan or idea you thought you had has to be thrown out the window? In the Star Trek Adventures core role-playing book, it is on page 96. Daring is described as, daring comes into play whenever a character reacts to a new situation without doubt, hesitation, or caution, covers circumstances where characters take decisive action without a detailed plan or analysis, and relies on gut instinct and quick reflexes. Character might use daring when responding to an emergency, attempting to evade or resist some form of immediate danger, when acting aggressively, when acting based on instinct, or to resist mental assault, fear, or panic through stubbornness or defiance. So there's a lot of kind of flexibility there, which is true for a lot of the attributes in Star Trek Adventures, a little less so in the generic SRD list. That the names themselves just kind of they paint a picture that I think is close enough to other pen and paper systems attributes that kind of draws a like for like comparison that people might kind of go in with a feeling of what it means. But I feel like daring kind of takes agility as far as evasion or resisting immediate danger, but adds in this aspect of how does your character behave in quick, unplanned situations, which I think that comes up a lot in Stargate, and I think being able to tie an attribute to that could be cool. Daring is the one I am least confident in though. I have made changes to the SRD list. I feel strongly that agility and coordination both don't need to be on the list, but I'm not entirely certain that daring is the proper replacement after combining the two. But I'm gonna move with this and kind of see what we can get. And as we kind of flesh out some of the like the species for the game and start adding in like the life path character creation process and what kind of situations would add to a character's daring, what kind of species inherently get some kind of boost to daring, could be interesting. And this might be one that I have to come back and play with a little bit. Skills and disciplines are then areas that are either build off of or are really areas that are the character was trained in that have less to do with their like innate physical aspects. Same could be true for attributes. This isn't as total split between what you get, like what does your DNA provide you versus what does your like education and environment create. Your species, where you grew up and how you grew up are all going to play a role in attributes and skills. So there's not like a clean delineation between them. But if it's helpful to kind of think about it more like that, could be helpful. Fight is like, and these skills, they're called disciplines in Star Trek Adventures, which is why I've got this here, though I'll probably stick to skills. I'm worried skills being really similar to like a skill list and other systems like 5e might create too much of a hurdle to have the same name for things that do behave differently, or would it be better to just give it a different name so that people don't have this like baked in baggage of something else from a different system? All this probably does what you think it does. The only one that needs some explanation, I think, off the bat is operate, where operate would involve both operating technology that is both known and unknown to the character, and also which would include piloting or driving. Yeah, that's kind of the skills. I'm thinking about this more and more. Like I'm not in love with like the verb tense and the specific word usage that the SRD 220 list came up with. In Star Trek Adventures, these are more the disciplines are actually more like the departments on a ship. So there's like command as a discipline, and engineering is a discipline, and science is a discipline. And I think that I really like that, but I don't know, like not all of those immediately pull over to Stargate. Con, for instance, I had never heard like take the con. I don't know if that's a naval term that they continued to use. I'm assuming so, but that obviously wouldn't really apply to Stargate, and especially because I'm not assuming that the default setting for this is a spaceship, where I think in Star Trek you absolutely do. Operating a starship takes a big chunk of character creation focus and resources, where it kind of has to become secondary in Stargate, because while yes, absolutely could spend a lot of time on a starship, and you could create a campaign entirely around a Stargate Command affiliated starship, they're just so few and far between, and the shows themselves outside of Stargate universe really like made the ship a highlight of the show for a long period of time, where the assumption is that you're going through the Stargate, which involves walking through the gate from one base to another. Being able to pilot and operate technology falling all under in one skill is a little stressful, in the same way that no could cover things linguistics, could cover ancient Earth history, and it could cover quantum mechanics. Those characters would all be very different from each other if there was a much larger skill list. I think I want to err on the side of less complicated. A attribute and skill list, stick to 6 and 6, and then rely and maybe even provide more than Star Trek Adventures does, provide more areas for focuses. So focuses are a list of areas that your character has received extensive specific training in. It is a list that is not created by the game developer. It's in tandem with the GM and the player, kind of free form selection, though like makes sense. So these should be really like specific areas of knowledge that would be associated with one of the skills. Examples that I think would be good in a Stargate game, you could have everything from hand-to-hand combat. You could have a focus in, I don't know, you could have a focus in long range, or maybe just firearm combat. This isn't final, I'm just spitballing here. But then you could have a focus in wormhole technology specifically. You could have a focus in linguistics, like I previously mentioned. You could have a focus in starship piloting. I don't know, like you could really like kind of run the gamut here. And these are all like player picked during the character creation process. So I think by relying on focuses and maybe even allowing more focuses than I've seen in Star Trek Adventures, like at the beginning character creation, so that characters that might have the same no score feel really differently because their focuses come into play a lot. I think what focuses do, if a task would fall under a PC's focus, the range for a critical success equals the skill score. So if you were rolling a reason no to, I don't know, like you're looking at a star map trying to figure out where to go, you're rolling reason no, and you have a focus in astro navigation or something along those lines. Instead of needing to roll a 1 to get a critical success, if your no was a 5, you can now roll under a 5 to get a critical success. And I believe it's under the score, not equal to and below. There is a variant rule. There is a variant rule described in the describing the SRD that I'm interested in using, and it's focus scores. So for the example being, one character could have starship operation with a focus score of 1, where another character could have like astrophysics focus of 3. So then instead of using the skill score related to that task to determine what the new range for critical success is, you would increase the range for critical success by adding the number of the focus. So instead of on Starship Operation 1, if you're using a focus, you could roll a 2 or below because the range becomes 1 + 1 = 2. Astrophysics, you could roll a 4 or below. And in this instance, you would be able to equal the score. Interesting. That one I want to dive into more. I think if we're going to be if our game is going to be more focus heavy than Star Trek Adventures, I think going with a score for the focus allows more separation in similar characters and can enable more specificity and display more expertise in certain areas. But I don't know if I want, if that level of complication makes sense. All right, that's all I'm going to talk about in this video. It's already a lengthy one. I knew these were going to be long. This is actually the second time I've recorded this. All this I wrote as if that was going to be the video. Ended up being like close to an hour and a half long, and I know that that's bad content. So I basically recorded that, and then I came back, and now once my thoughts were more together, I could explain the decisions without having to watch me make the decisions. I spent a lot of time thinking about the different attributes and skills, and I'm like I said, 80% sure this is where I'll be, but it's been a day, so I'm gonna think about it some more, and I don't want to reject the spark of inspiration if it comes calling and gives me an alternative I like better. So that's kind of the basics that I think. These are the things that influence the target number, which is obviously like a big part of the game. Now that I've got these at least down on paper, I can now move on to creating first drafts of the various species available at character creation for Stargate Command characters. And that, I think, will be my next video, is figuring out what kind, taking a look at this existing the life path creation process for Star Trek Adventures. I've got to check and see if that process is actually in the SRD or not. And if not, what would it look like to kind of port that over? What would that process look like, etc. Thanks for watching this. I hope it's interesting. If you are legitimately excited and interested in a Stargate 2D20 system, let me know in the comments. Make sure you subscribe so you see future videos from me doing this. I'm excited and energized by the prospect of this project. As long as I can keep that excitement around it, I'm gonna keep working on stuff. For legal reasons, obviously, and not putting this out as an actual product. Stargate is owned by MGM/Amazon. I have no interest in drawing the ire of any of Amazon's lawyers. So this is not a product that I'm creating. This is something I'm creating for me to play with at home or with friends. I do not intend on creating a published version of this available to people that would use parts of the Stargate trademark. At the most, I might do some serial number filing, remove any trademarks, come up with some kind of a setting and backstory that is similar enough to Stargate that you don't have to do a ton of work, but would enable me to be able to publish something for other people to use. But let me know what you think in the comments. Feel free to dive into the 2D20 SRD that I'll link below. Feel free to go check out the 5e Stargate game from Wyvern Gaming. I'm pretty sure that the Wyvern lost their license after Amazon acquired MGM, so it is not under active development. I don't ever really think it took hold in either the Stargate fandom or the pen and paper TTRPGs fandoms, but I think you can get a PDF for relatively cheap from them if you just want to take a look at it. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Computer, close the iris.